Hello there and welcome to the Healing Insight channel. Tonight we are drifting into the quiet, powerful world of emotions. Not as labels or reactions, but as invisible forces that shape how you see, remember, decide, and connect. Emotions are not just something you feel. They are something your body remembers, your mind predicts, and your nervous system carries with it through every ordinary moment of the day. We often think of emotions as sudden visitors arriving without warning, then fading away. But beneath that surface, something much deeper is always unfolding. Signals rise from the body before thoughts form. Memories quietly color the present. Subtle shifts guide attention, bond people together, and sometimes pull them apart. Even when you feel still, emotion is gently at work, arranging your inner world like a tide moving beneath calm water. In this video, we will explore emotions as living processes rather than passing moods. Not to analyze them, but to notice how extraordinary they truly are. How they protect, mislead, connect, and reveal. How they can feel overwhelming one moment and quietly wise the next. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too. One sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is relax. Let your body soften. Allow your eyes to grow heavy. And let your mind unwind as we explore this fascinating world. Let's begin. Slow exhalations can calm the nervous system within minutes. Your breath is one of the few direct handles you have on your own physiology. When you slow the exhale, you are sending a message of safety into a system that might be braced for threat. The long out-breath activates pathways linked to calming, lowering the sense of urgency and helping the body step down from high alert. That is why people instinctively sigh after a tense moment. The sigh is not only emotion, it is regulation. Slow exhalation also breaks the feedback loop where fast breathing convinces the brain something is wrong, which then fuels more anxiety. By changing the pace, you interrupt the spiral. The calming effect can feel subtle at first, like taking your foot off an invisible accelerator. Then little by little the shoulders drop and the mind calms. This is especially powerful because it does not require perfect circumstances. You can do it in a crowded room, in a car, or lying awake at night. It is a small action with a surprisingly big influence. When the exhale lengthens, the body listens. You can feel emotions from imagined events as strongly as real ones. Your brain treats a vivid imagined scene like a rehearsal, and rehearsals can move the body. Picture walking into a room where everyone suddenly turns away and you may feel your stomach tighten as if it already happened. Imagine a loved one arriving safely and warmth can spread through your chest like a real embrace. This is because emotion is built from meaning, not only from facts. The nervous system responds to what it believes is relevant. And a convincing inner story can look relevant enough. That power explains why worry can spiral without any new evidence and why hope can steady you before anything changes. It also explains why stories and movies can make you cry. Your body participates in the narrative. Once you realize this, you begin to see imagination as a tool, not just a trap. The same ability that fuels anxiety can also fuel courage, preparation, and comfort. Daydreaming can shift your mood by rehearsing hopes or worries. A daydream is not always a break from reality. Sometimes it is a quiet steering wheel. Your mind drifts into a future conversation and you feel confident before you ever speak. Or it drifts into a future disaster and you feel doomed before anything occurs. The brain is practicing outcomes, and practice has emotional consequences. That is why you can emerge from a few minutes of wandering thought feeling heavier or lighter without knowing why. Daydreaming can also become a hidden classroom. You repeat the same imagined scenes and your brain starts treating them like familiar paths, making certain moods easier to enter. This can be helpful when you picture a challenge going well and your body learns steadiness. It can be harmful when you replay a humiliation and your body learns dread. The fascinating part is that daydreams often feel harmless because they are silent. Yet, they can be emotional training sessions shaping how tomorrow feels before tomorrow arrives. The same event can produce opposite emotions in different people. Two people can stand in the same rainstorm and come away with entirely different inner worlds. One feels refreshed, the other feels trapped. This is not because one is right and the other is wrong. It is because emotions are shaped by interpretation, history, and expectation. A surprise party might feel like love to someone who craves attention and like panic to someone who hates being watched. Even praise can land differently. For one person it feels like recognition. For another it feels like pressure. Your brain is not reacting to events alone. It is reacting to what the event means to you based on what you have learned will happen next. That meaning can be built from childhood patterns, recent stress, or cultural rules about what is acceptable to feel. This is why understanding emotion often requires curiosity instead of judgment. The same moment can carry a completely different message in another nervous system, or can make you feel smaller yet more connected to others. Or is the emotion of encountering something too vast for your usual mental boxes? It can come from a night sky, a towering mountain, a choral voice, or an act of kindness so pure it interrupts your cynicism. In that moment, the self can feel smaller, not in a shameful way but in a spacious way, like stepping back from a close-up mirror. Many people describe awe as calming and humbling at once because it rearranges priorities. Tiny worries lose some weight and attention shifts to belonging in something larger. Awe can also increase generosity and cooperation, as if feeling part of a bigger picture makes you more willing to care for others within it. It is fascinating that an emotion triggered by vastness can bring people closer together or does not demand action like anger or fear. It invites orientation. It says, look again. The world is bigger than your current story. Your brain can decide before you consciously feel the emotion. Long before you can name what is happening, your nervous system is already choosing a direction. Tiny shifts in breathing, muscle tone, and attention can begin in the background like a stage crew moving props before the curtain rises. That is why you sometimes notice your jaw is tight, your shoulders are lifted, or your stomach has dropped, and only then realize you are anxious or irritated. Much of this comes from fast pattern matching, where your brain compares the present to stored templates of past moments. If the match suggests danger, rejection, or reward, your body prepares first and your story catches up later. This can feel spooky, like you are late to your own experience, but it is also protective. It means you are built to respond quickly, then reflect. The brain can invent feelings to match unexplained body sensations. When your body sends a strong signal and your mind cannot find the reason, it often creates one. A sudden flutter in your chest, a tight throat, a strange warmth in your face. These sensations demand an explanation because the brain dislikes mystery inside the skin. So it scans the room, the day, the last conversation, and it builds a story that fits. That story can become the emotion you think you are feeling. Even if the original sensation came from something simple like caffeine, fatigue, or leftover adrenaline. This is why you can walk into a perfectly fine afternoon and suddenly feel uneasy, then start searching for what must be wrong. Your brain is not trying to deceive you. It is trying to make the body make sense. Once you notice this, you can pause and ask a different question. Instead of what is wrong, you can ask what signal arrived first and whether it truly belongs to this moment. Babies can recognize emotional tone before they understand words. Before language arrives, a baby is already living in a world of feeling. The meaning is carried in pitch, rhythm, volume, and the tiny pauses between sounds. A gentle voice can settle a squirming body, while a sharp edge can bring sudden stillness, even when the words themselves are nonsense to them. That early sensitivity is not about manners. It is about survival, because tone reveals whether the world is safe right now. You can watch it happen in real time. A caregiver's calm cadence becomes a kind of nervous system handhold, guiding breathing and attention. Later, when speech blossoms, many people still react to tone first and content second. That is why someone can say the right thing in the wrong way and it still hurts. Long before we learn vocabulary, we learn the emotional music underneath it. You can feel two conflicting emotions at the same time. The human heart is not a single lame road. You can be proud and terrified in the same breath. You can feel grateful for change and mourn what it replaced. You can love someone deeply and still feel furious with them. This is not indecision. It is complexity. Different parts of your brain and body can evaluate the same situation with different priorities, then send different emotional messages at once. The result can feel confusing, like being pulled in two directions. But it is also a sign you are seeing more than one truth at the same time. Mixed emotions often appear during transitions like moving, graduating, becoming a parent, or ending a chapter you once wanted. They can be uncomfortable because they resist simple stories. Yet they can also protect you from extremes. When joy is tempered by fear, you prepare carefully. When sadness is paired with relief, you recover faster. Conflicting emotions are not a flaw in the system. They are the system trying to tell you the full shape of a moment. Savoring extends happiness by stretching attention onto good moments. Savoring extends happiness by stretching attention onto good moments. Instead of letting a pleasant experience vanish in a blink, the mind lingers, noticing texture, warmth, and meaning. A good meal becomes more than fuel. A compliment becomes more than a sound. A calm afternoon becomes more than empty time. This lingering is not denial of life's problems. It is training the brain to fully register what is already here. Without savoring, happiness can be real yet brief, like a spark that never catches. With savoring, the spark has time to glow. People savor in different ways. Some retell the moment to a friend. Some pause to notice the feeling in the body. Some take a mental photograph and return to it later. The fascinating part is that savoring changes memory too. When attention is deeper, the moment is stored more strongly, which makes it easier to access during hard days. Savoring is a skill of presence. It turns fleeting good into lasting nourishment. Rituals can soothe anxiety by creating predictable steps. Rituals can soothe anxiety by creating predictable steps. When the world feels uncertain, a repeated sequence tells your nervous system, here is something reliable. Washing your face the same way at night, brewing tea in a familiar order, arranging a desk before work. These actions create a small island of control. The comfort is not superstition in this case. It is rhythm. Predictability reduces the brain's need to scan for danger because the next step is known. Rituals also signal transition. A bedtime ritual tells the body that effort is ending and rest is allowed. A morning ritual tells the body that waking is safe and structured. This is why rituals can be comforting even when they are simple. They are less about the objects and more about the sequence. The fascinating part is that rituals can carry meaning too. Lighting a candle, saying a quiet phrase, or taking a slow breath can become a personal language of safety. In anxious seasons, that language can hold you steady. Dehydration can amplify irritability even before you feel thirsty. First is often the last announcement, not the first. Before you notice a dry mouth, mild dehydration can already be nudging your mood. You may feel foggier, more easily annoyed, or less able to tolerate noise and interruptions. That is because water supports basic brain function, including the smooth flow of signals that keep attention and emotion balanced. When hydration dips, the brain works harder to do the same tasks, and that extra effort can show up as irritability. It is the same reason you can feel more tense on a hot day without understanding why. Your body is quietly spending resources on temperature control and fluid balance, leaving less slack for emotional flexibility. The tricky part is that the irritability can feel like it belongs to the situation, not to your physiology. You might blame the traffic, the emails, the people. Then you drink water and the world becomes slightly more forgiving. It is humbling how often mood has a simple physical contributor hiding underneath the story. Disgust evolved partly to protect you from invisible pathogens. Disgust is often treated like a rude emotion, but it is one of the body's oldest guardians. It pushes you away from what could harm you, even when the danger cannot be seen. Rotting smells, slime, decay, and certain tastes can trigger an immediate recoil before you have time to reason it out. That reaction is not about being dramatic. It is about avoiding contamination in a world where microbes were once mysterious killers. What makes disgust fascinating is how it can extend beyond food. People can feel moral disgust too, where a behavior feels contaminating even if it cannot physically infect you. That suggests the brain uses the same protective circuitry for social boundaries, not just biological ones. This can be useful, but it can also misfire, turning harmless differences into feelings of repulsion. Disgust is powerful because it speaks the language of the body. It is not trying to persuade you. It is trying to move you. A single facial expression can spread through a crowd in seconds. One person's face can become a signal flare and other faces answer before anyone speaks. A smile often pulls a matching smile from nearby mouths, not as imitation, but as automatic coordination. A look of alarm can ripple outward, turning heads and tightening bodies like a wave moving across tall grass. This happens because humans are built to read and copy subtle muscle patterns, especially around the eyes and mouth, at speeds too fast for deliberate thought. The result is emotional syncing, a kind of social weather system where moods shift collectively. In a theater, laughter can grow louder simply because people catch it from each other. In a tense meeting, one hard glare can make an entire room go quiet. Your expression is not just private information. It can become a public event that changes everyone's behavior. Writing about emotions can improve health markers in some studies. When feelings stay trapped, they often loop, repeating the same scenes without resolution. Writing can interrupt that loop by turning a swirl into a sequence. You place events into order, connect cause and effect, and give your mind a story that feels more complete. In some studies, people who wrote about stressful experiences showed changes in certain health-related measures over time, suggesting that expression can ease strain on the body. The act of writing is not only confession, it is processing. It can transform vague distress into specific meaning, which makes it easier for the nervous system to stand down. Writing also creates a private witness. You can tell the truth without managing anyone else's reaction. That freedom can bring unexpected honesty, which is often where relief begins. The fascinating part is that ink on paper can become a physiological event. A few paragraphs can shift breathing, heart rate, and muscle tension as if the body finally believes it is allowed to put something down. Your body can start crying before your mind understands why. Tears are not always the end of a thought. Sometimes they arrive first, like a message stamped urgent and delivered straight to the surface. You might be watching a simple scene, hearing a certain melody, or standing in a place you have not visited in years, and suddenly your eyes are full. Only afterward does meaning assemble itself. This happens because crying is tied to deep systems that manage overload, connection, and release. Your body can treat a moment as emotionally important, even when your conscious mind has not translated it into words yet. Tears can also interrupt escalating stress by changing breathing and muscle tension, almost like a built-in reset. That is why crying can feel confusing, then strangely relieving. It is not witness leaking out. It is your nervous system doing an ancient job protecting you from carrying too much at once. Some emotions are easier to name after you learn the word. Before a feeling has a label, it can exist like weather inside you. Real but hard to describe. You might sense tension, restlessness, or a vague ache, yet struggle to explain what it is. Then you learn a word like envy or homesickness and suddenly the experience becomes easier to hold. Naming does not create the emotion from nothing, but it can sharpen it into a shape. It gives your mind a handle, a way to sort the feeling from similar ones and track what triggers it. This is one reason people often feel understood when they hear the right word at the right time. It turns confusion into recognition. Language can also expand emotional life. When you learn finer distinctions, you start noticing them in yourself. That can change your choices because you cannot work with what you cannot identify. A named emotion becomes something you can meet directly instead of something that drifts through you unnamed. Anticipation can be more intense than the reward itself. The hours before something meaningful often carry a special electricity, a trip, a reunion, a gift, a new chapter. The waiting can feel like standing on the edge of a wave. Your brain is building the future in advance, tasting it before it arrives. It imagines faces, scenes, and outcomes. And that imagined version can be perfectly designed to thrill you. Then the real moment comes with its ordinary textures and imperfections, and it can feel smaller than the dream. This does not mean the reward failed. It means anticipation is its own emotional engine powered by possibility. Possibility has no limits, so it can grow enormous. This is why surprises work, why countdowns feel dramatic, and why patience can be so hard. Your nervous system is already spending emotional energy on a tomorrow that is not here yet. When you realize this, you can learn to enjoy anticipation as a real experience, not just a waiting room. Calm can be contagious when one person slows their speech. In a tense moment, the fastest way to change the room is often to change the tempo. When one person speaks slowly with space between phrases, it sends an unspoken message that there is time. That message can lower urgency in everyone listening. People begin to breathe deeper without realizing it. The mind stops sprinting and starts walking. Slow speech also reduces the chance of mishearing. It invites attention instead of demanding it. This is why comforting people often speak gently, not because they are performing kindness, but because their cadence is guiding another nervous system towards steadiness. What makes this fascinating is how physical it is. Calm is not only an idea you choose. It is a state your body can borrow from someone else's rhythm. Slow speech becomes a shared metronome. It helps a group find the same pace again. And once the pace slows, solutions often appear that were invisible at high speed. The SIBO effects can change real feelings to expectation alone. Expectation is not only a thought, it can become a bodily instruction. When people believe a pill, ritual, or treatment will help, their brains may shift perception, pain, and emotion in measurable ways, even when the substance itself is inactive. This does not mean the person is pretending. It means the brain's prediction machinery is powerful enough to influence experience from the top down. If the mind expects relief, it can reduce threat signals and change how sensations are interpreted. That is why a trusted doctor's reassurance can feel physically calming and why a comforting routine can make discomfort easier to hold. The placebo effect is also a reminder that meaning is medicine-shaped. The same action can feel stronger when it is wrapped in credibility, care, and confidence. This is not a reason to ignore real treatment. It is a reason to respect the mind's ability to amplify what it believes. Your expectations can become part of your nervous system's reality. Emotions reshape what you see, changing colors, contrast, and detail. Your eyes collect light, but your feelings help decide what that light becomes. When you are tense, your attention can lock onto edges, movement, and possible problems, making the world feel harsher and more urgent. When you are safe and content, you may notice subtler textures, friendly faces, and small patterns you would otherwise miss. It is not that reality changes. It is that your brain is allocating its limited spotlight differently. This is why a familiar room can look strangely different after a frightening phone call, or why an ordinary street can seem bright and full of possibility after good news. Emotion is not a decoration placed on top of perception. It is part of the machinery that builds perception in the first place. Your inner state can act like a lens, quietly adjusting what matters. Fear can sharpen hearing, making tiny sounds feel suddenly urgent. Fear does not only make you want to run. It can make you listen like your life depends on it. A faint creak, a distant footstep, a soft click you would normally ignore can snap into the center of attention. In threatening moments, the brain can boost the importance of sound so you can detect danger without needing to see it. That is why silence can feel loud when you are scared. Your hearing becomes a radar, scanning for clues and building a map from scraps. This can be helpful in truly risky situations, but it also explains why anxious nights can feel haunted by ordinary noises. The refrigerator hum becomes a warning. The settling of a house becomes a question. Fear is not only an emotion. It is a full-body mode that tunes your senses towards survival, sometimes overshooting the target. Love and grief activate overlapping networks like two twins of attachment. Love is often described as warmth and grief as cold absence. Yet they spring from the same root. Both are built around attachment. The deep bond that makes another person feel like part of your own stability. When that bond is present, your system relaxes into safety and belonging. When it is threatened or broken, the same bond becomes pain because the brain keeps searching for what used to be there. That is why grief can include longing, vivid memories, and sudden moments of feeling the person nearby even when you know they are not. It is attachment still doing its job, reaching out. This overlap is also why love can feel vulnerable. The stronger the bond, the stronger the alarm when it wobbles. In a quiet way, grief reveals how powerful connection really is because it shows what the body considered home. You can feel an emotion for a fraction of a second. Some feelings are so brief they vanish before you can catch them. Like a spark in the dark, a flicker of irritation, a flash of delight, a tiny sting of fear can pass through your face and body in less time than it takes to explain. These rapid emotions often show up as quick changes in posture, a sudden tightening around the eyes, or a sharp inhale that immediately smooths out. You might only notice the aftertaste, like the faint echo of a mood you cannot name. This matters because those micro moments can still steer choices. A split second of dislike can make you turn away from an idea. A split second of interest can make you lean in. Many people think emotions must be big to be real. But your emotional life is also made of tiny signals continuously updating your direction even when the updates are almost invisible. Laughter is an ancient social signal, not just a reaction. Laughter is not always about jokes. Sometimes it appears when people feel nervous, relieved, or deeply bonded, as if the sound itself is doing a job. In groups, laughter can say, "We are safe together," even if the world outside is uncertain. It can smooth over awkwardness, lower defenses, and invite closeness without needing a long explanation. That is why a single laugh can ignite a room. The sound gives everyone permission to relax at the same time. Laughter also carries information about belonging. People tend to laugh more with others than alone, even when the same words are said. It is like an emotional glue that works through breath and rhythm. And because it is hard to fake convincingly for long, laughter often acts as a truth signal. When it is real, it tells the body and the group that something in this moment can be trusted. Some people feel others' emotions as if they were physical sensations. For most of us, empathy is a mental bridge, imagining what someone else might be feeling. But for some people that bridge is so direct it can feel like sensation. Another person's wince might create a twinge in their own body. A watched injury can produce a genuine jolt at discomfort, not just sympathy. This is not imagination in the casual sense. It is a rare kind of cross-wiring where observing a feeling or a touch can trigger an echo inside the observer. It can make crowded places emotionally exhausting because the room becomes a chorus of signals. It can also make kindness feel unavoidable because distress is not distant. It is near. This shows something profound about humans. Our brains are not sealed containers. They are designed for resonance. Even when we do not physically feel what others feel, we are built to be influenced by each other more deeply than we usually admit. Emotional tears contain different chemicals than reflex tears. Not all tears are made for the same job. Reflex tears wash and protect your eyes from smoke, wind, or a rogue eyelash. Emotional tears come from a different kind of pressure, the kind that builds inside a story. Researchers have found differences in what emotional tears can carry compared to basic protective tears, suggesting the body is not only cleaning the eye. It is doing something more complex. Crying can change breathing, soften muscle tension, and shift the whole nervous system toward release. That is why a good cry can leave you drained yet strangely clearer. Emotional tears also communicate. They are visible proof that something mattered enough to overflow, and that visibility can invite comfort from others in a way words sometimes fail to. Even when you cry alone, the act can still serve a purpose. It signals to your own brain that the moment is significant, and it helps move intense feeling through the body instead of trapping it there. Belonging can lower stress hormones during challenging tasks. Belonging is like a silent safety net under your nervous system. When you feel accepted, your body often handles difficulty with less panic because it expects support if things go wrong. This is why a hard job interview feels different when you know someone in the room is rooting for you. It is why a child tries braver things when a trusted adult is nearby. Belonging does not erase effort, but it changes the cost of effort. The body spends less energy defending itself and more energy performing. Even subtle cues can create this effect, like being remembered, being included in a small joke, or hearing your name said with warmth. Those moments tell the brain, you are not alone in the challenge. What makes belonging so powerful is that it turns stress from a personal threat into a shared experience. The task is still hard, but the world feels less hostile while you do it. Your gut and heart send emotional signals upward, not just downward. It is easy to picture emotions as thoughts that trickle into the body, but the traffic goes both ways. Your heart rhythm, breathing pattern, and the sensations of your stomach are constantly reporting back to the brain. Those signals help shape what you interpret as calm, excitement, dread, or safety. That is why a fluttering chest can make a neutral moment feel intense, and why a steady, slow breath can make problems feel more manageable. The brain uses these internal cues as ingredients when it builds a feeling. Some scientists call this interoception, your sense of what is happening inside you. It can be surprisingly influential. A small shift in bodily state can tilt your emotional meaning-making without you noticing the source. This is one reason emotions can feel like they come from nowhere. Sometimes the first clue was already in your pulse, quietly speaking upward. Smell can trigger emotion faster than most other senses. A scent can hit like a hidden doorway. You catch it for a heartbeat and suddenly you are not only remembering a place, you are feeling inside it. The air itself seems to carry the mood. Whether it is comfort, dread, or a strange sweetness you cannot explain. Smell has a direct route into memory and feeling, which is why it can bypass the polite, logical part of the mind that usually filters reactions. One whiff of sunscreen can pull up summer heat and childhood freedom. A hint of disinfectant can summon a hospital corridor you thought you left behind. What makes this so uncanny is how immediate it is. You do not choose the memory. You do not plan the emotion. The body responds as if the past is briefly present again. Smell is time travel without pictures, and it often arrives before you can even identify what you smelled. Nostalgia can boost pain tolerance in controlled experiments. Nostalgia is not only a warm feeling. In some studies, remembering a meaningful past can make discomfort easier to endure. It is as if the mind, when it revisits a moment of belonging, lends the body a little extra steadiness. This matters because pain is not only a signal from nerves. It is also shaped by attention, meaning, and emotional context. When nostalgia brings a sense of being cared for or connected, the brain may treat the present as less threatening, and that can change how intensely pain is experienced. You can sense this effect in everyday life too. People often reach for old songs, childhood foods, or familiar scents when they are stressed, not just for comfort but for resilience. Nostalgia can feel like a soft inner shelter. And under that shelter, the body sometimes copes better than expected. Anger can briefly raise confidence even when you are wrong. Anger can feel like clarity, which is why it is so persuasive. When it rises, it tightens your focus and pushes your mind towards certainty. You may feel taller inside your own thoughts, ready to argue, decide, and act. The tricky part is that confidence is not the same as accuracy. Anger can make weak ideas feel strong, and shaky assumptions feel obvious. It can also make you underestimate risks because the emotional message is simple. Move forward. Do not hesitate. That is why arguments can escalate quickly. Each person feels more sure as the heat rises, even when the truth is complicated. Yet anger is not pointless. It often appears when a boundary feels crossed or something important feels threatened. The skill is learning to treat anger like an alarm, not a verdict. It can tell you something matters without proving you are right. Anxiety can make time feel slower, stretching seconds into long moments. When anxiety arrives, the present can feel oddly expanded, like every sound and movement takes longer than it should. Waiting for a reply, hearing footsteps behind you, watching a door that might open. The mind fills each second with monitoring. Part of this comes from heightened vigilance. Your attention is scanning for outcomes, and that constant checking creates the sensation of a longer interval. Anxiety also pulls you into prediction. The brain rehearses what might happen next, and those imagined futures crowd the moment until it feels heavy and stretched. This is why anxious experiences can feel exhausting even when nothing occurs. Time becomes thick with possibilities. The strange twist is that this slow-motion feeling can make anxiety more convincing. If the moment feels long and intense, it must be important, right? Understanding this can be freeing. Sometimes the slowing of time is not a warning about reality. It is a symptom of the mind overworking the present. Sadness can narrow attention, making small details feel enormous. Sadness can turn the mind into a quiet spotlight that refuses to widen. A single phrase, a small mistake, a minor disappointment can swell until it seems to explain everything. This narrowing is not just mood. It can be a kind of inward focusing that keeps you close to what hurts, almost as if the brain is insisting you examine the loss from every angle. In that state, the world can feel dimmer and simpler because the mind is conserving energy and pulling you away from the noise of possibilities. Yet, there is something strangely purposeful about this narrowing. Sadness often follows change, separation, or unmet longing, and it can slow you down enough to register what mattered. That is why sadness can arrive with unexpected clarity about values and attachments. It is not pleasant, but it can be meaningful. The danger comes when the spotlight never lifts and the small detail becomes a permanent story. Joy can widen attention, helping you notice more possibilities. Joy is not only a feeling. It is a shift in how the world is scanned. When you are joyful, your mind tends to open outward. You notice options, patterns, and connections that might be invisible in a tense state. A stranger's face looks friendlier. A problem looks more solvable. A new idea feels worth exploring. This widening effect matters because creativity and learning often depend on seeing beyond the obvious. Joy can loosen the grip of threat and give your brain permission to roam. That is one reason playful moods can lead to surprising solutions. People are more willing to experiment when the emotional atmosphere feels safe. Joy also spreads because openness invites openness. A small laugh can make others relax their guard, and suddenly the whole room has more room in it. Joy does not erase reality. It changes what you think is possible inside reality. Relief can feel like pleasure because danger signals finally stop. Relief is a quiet celebration your body throws when it realizes it can stand down. The jaw unclenches. The breath drops lower. The chest loosens. Sometimes there is even a small laugh. Not because something is funny, but because the system is releasing pressure. Relief can feel surprisingly good, almost like a reward, because it marks the end of alarm. Your nervous system has been spending energy preparing for impact, and then suddenly it is told you are safe. That shift can create a wave of warmth, lightness, or even dizziness, as if the body is adjusting to a new world. Relief also teaches when a feared outcome does not happen, the brain updates its predictions at least a little. This is why reassurance feels so strong in the moment, yet so temporary later. Relief is not just the absence of fear. It is the sensation of returning to yourself. Your brain can mislabel excitement as fear when your heart races. Your body has only so many ways to signal high energy, and a pounding heart is one of them. When that surge arrives, your mind rushes to explain it, scanning the scene for a reason. If you are stepping onto a stage, meeting someone new, or taking a risk, the same physical rush can be read as danger or possibility. That is why thrilling moments can feel scary, and scary moments can sometimes feel oddly electric. The label you land on changes everything. If you call it fear, you might shrink back and search for exits. If you call it excitement, you lean forward and look for opportunities. This is not positive thinking. It is meaning-making at speed. With practice, some people learn to treat the racing heart as a neutral engine, then choose the story that fixed their goals instead of their worries. People often mimic smiles without noticing they are doing it. A smile is not only something you give. It is something your nervous system catches. In conversation, tiny facial movements can echo back and forth like a quiet handshake, syncing two people without either one deciding to do it. That is why a warm cashier can lift your mood in seconds. Even if you never exchange names, your face is reading their face and answering before your thoughts arrive. This mirroring can soften tension, build trust, and signal that you are safe to be around. It can also reveal when something feels off. If someone smiles and your face does not respond, your body may be detecting mismatch or threat. Mirroring is one reason emotions feel contagious in groups. It is not magic. It is muscle and attention cooperating at high speed. You are constantly learning how others feel by becoming briefly and subtly a version of their expression. Music can reliably summon chills by breaking and resolving patterns. Chills often arrive at the exact moment a song does something unexpected, then lands safely again. A voice swells beyond what you predicted. A harmony shifts into a new color. A pause stretches just long enough to make your body hold its breath. Your brain is a prediction machine, always guessing what comes next. And music is a playground for those guesses. When a piece violates your expectation in the beautiful way, attention spikes and emotion rises, like stepping onto a stair you did not know was there. Then when the music resolves, your system releases that tension as a wave of sensation. For some people, it travels up the arms or across the scalp, a physical signature of meaning. Chills are not only about sound. They are about surprise, release, and the feeling that something invisible just clicked into place inside you. Emotional memories can feel vivid even when details are inaccurate. A memory can glow with certainty while quietly rearranging the facts. You might remember the exact feeling of a moment, the tightness in your chest, or the rush of relief, yet misplace who said what, which door was open, or what time it happened. That is because memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction built to preserve meaning, especially emotional meaning. When you recall an event, your brain stitches together fragments with your current beliefs, your current mood, and the story you have repeated over the years. The emotion acts like a spotlight that keeps certain elements bright while other elements fade into shadow. This can be unsettling, but it also shows what memory is for. It is designed to guide you, to warn you, to teach you what mattered, even if it sacrifices perfect accuracy. The feeling may be true even when the details drift. Stress can switch your body into a fuel-saving survival mode. When stress stays high, your body starts acting like resources are scarce. It prioritizes immediate needs, quick energy, and readiness for challenge. Even if you are only sitting at a desk, systems that are not urgent can get dialed down because survival mode is expensive. That is why prolonged stress can affect sleep, digestion, and a sense of having mental space. It can feel as if your body is bracing for an emergency that never arrives. The strange part is that this mode can become familiar. Your nervous system learns the pattern and keeps returning to it like a default setting. Small problems begin to feel like big threats because the body is already geared up. The hopeful part is that the switch can move the other way too. Repeated signals of safety like steady routines and genuine rest can teach the body it is allowed to spend energy on recovery again. Blushing is one of the few emotions that announces itself on skin. Blushing can feel like betrayal because it shows your inner state without asking your permission. A flush spreads across the face and neck, broadcasting that something just mattered to you. It can happen with embarrassment, attraction, praise, or sudden attention. The interesting twist is that this involuntary signal can build trust. When people see someone blush after a mistake, they often read it as sincerity, a sign the person understands the social line they crossed. That makes blushing a strange kind of social repair. Your body is telling the group, I know, I care, I am not ignoring this. Of course, blushing can also be unfair because it can appear even when you have done nothing wrong simply because you feel watched. Still, it reveals something powerful about emotion. Some feelings are not only private experiences. They are biological announcements that shape how others respond to you. Emotional intensity can rise even when the cause fades away. Sometimes the trigger is gone, yet your body keeps climbing. A harsh comment was hours ago, but your chest still burns. A near miss on the road is over, but your hands are still shaky. This happens because emotions can feed themselves through attention. The mind replays the scene, imagines alternate endings, or scans for signs it might happen again. Each replay can refresh the feeling like striking a match repeatedly. The body also takes time to come down from high arousal. Hormones and adrenaline do not vanish instantly just because you want them to. That lag can make it feel like the emotion has a mind of its own. But there is meaning in this too. Emotional intensity rising after an event can be your system trying to learn, to protect, to prevent repeat harm. The key is noticing when the replay is serving you and when it is only stoking the fire. When you step out of the loop, the intensity often begins to follow. A warm drink can subtly increase feelings of social warmth. Holding warmth in your hands can quietly change how you judge the world. A mite of tea is not only comfort in a simple way. It can nudge your brain toward interpreting people as friendlier and safer. The mind uses bodily cues as evidence. And warmth often means closeness, shelter, and care in the human story. That link begins early when heat is associated with being held and protected. Later, the same physical sensation can echo into social perception without you noticing the leap. This does not mean a hot drink forces kindness. It means your brain is willing to borrow meaning from the body when it is making quick decisions. The fascinating part is how ordinary this is. We think our judgments come from careful reasoning. Yet, tiny physical cues can tilt our first impressions. Warmth in the hands can become warmth in interpretation, like a small lantern changing the color of a room. Physical pain and social rejection share overlapping alarm circuitry. Being excluded can hurt in a way that feels strangely physical, and that is not poetic language. The brain uses some of the same inner alarms for bodily injury and for social threat because being cast out once carried real survival risk. Imagine hearing laughter stop when you enter a room or seeing messages go unanswered while others connect freely. The body can respond with a sinking stomach, a tight chest, a heat behind the eyes. Those sensations are not weakness. They are the nervous system treating disconnection as danger. This overlap also explains why comfort can feel medicinal. A kind message, a sincere invitation, or a steady presence can reduce distress the way rest reduces soreness. It is the alarm quieting down. Understanding this can change how you treat yourself and others. Social pain is not imaginary pain. It is an ancient warning system using the tools it already has. Uncertainty can feel worse than bad news for many people. A clear negative answer can sting, but a blank space can haunt. When you do not know what is coming, your mind keeps turning the future over like a stone, searching for sharp edges. It rehearses scenarios, checks signals, rereads conversations, and tries to control the uncontrollable by thinking harder. That effort is exhausting, and it can make uncertainty feel heavier than a confirmed disappointment. Bad news closes a door, but uncertainty keeps the hallway lit all night. You may even notice yourself preferring a definite no over an endless maybe because certainty allows your body to stand down. The strange twist is that uncertainty can also make you misread neutral cues as threatening, since the brain would rather prepare for a storm than be surprised by one. Recognizing this pattern can be soothing. The discomfort is not proof that something terrible is coming. It may simply be the mind struggling with an open loop. Gratitude can strengthen friendships by signaling that you notice effort. Gratitude is not only a warm feeling. It is a message that says, "I saw what you did and it mattered." That message can tighten the bonds between people because it turns invisible effort into visible value. Think of someone who brings you soup when you are sick, listens without rushing, or remembers a small detail you mentioned once. When gratitude is expressed clearly, it rewards the giver and teaches both people what kindness looks like in that relationship. It also reduces guessing. Many friendships fade not from conflict but from uncertainty about whether anyone is truly appreciated. Gratitude answers that quietly. It builds a culture of noticing where people feel safer giving again because they trust it will not disappear into silence. The fascinating part is that gratitude can make ordinary moments feel significant, which keeps a friendship alive in the spaces between big events. It is like adding light to the room, not by changing the furniture but by turning on a lamp. Envy can motivate improvement or sabotage depending on context. Envy is often treated as ugly, but it begins as information. It points to something you want, something you value, something you fear you cannot reach. That signal can take two very different paths. In one path, envy becomes a compass. You see someone's skill, confidence, or opportunity, and it clarifies your own goals. It can push you to practice, learn, and stretch toward a better version of yourself. In the other path, envy turns into a threat story where another person's success feels like proof you are falling behind. Then it may fuel bitterness, gossip, or a secret wish for them to fail simply to quiet your discomfort. The difference often comes down to whether you believe growth is possible. When you feel trapped, envy becomes poison. When you feel capable, envy becomes a spark. It is fascinating that the same emotion can either build your future or damage your relationships. The feeling itself is not the final outcome. Your interpretation decides where it goes. Pride can reinforce effort, but too much can block learning. Pride can be a quiet fuel that keeps you going when progress is slow. It marks a moment and says, "This mattered. Keep building." When pride is tied to effort, it rewards perseverance and helps you return to difficult work. You can feel it after finishing a long project, keeping a promise, or mastering a skill that once seemed impossible. But pride can also become a trap when it is tied to being right, being superior, or never needing help. Then it stops protecting an image instead of supporting growth. The mind becomes less curious because curiosity risks discovering flaws. Feedback begins to feel like attack. Mistakes become threats. That is how pride can turn from a healthy glow into a wall. The fascinating part is that pride is meant to stabilize identity. Yet it can either stabilize the identity of a learner or the identity of someone who must not change. The difference shows up in small moments, like whether you can say "I do not know" without feeling smaller. Shame makes people want to hide even from supportive friends. Shame does not simply say you did something wrong. It whispers that you are the wrong kind of person. That is why it drives hiding. It pulls you inward, away from eye contact, away from conversation, away from the very people who might reassure you. Shame can make a small mistake feel like exposure, as if everyone can see a stain you cannot wash out. It also changes memory. You may replay the moment again and again, not to learn, but to punish yourself into believing you deserve the pain. What makes shame so powerful is its loneliness. It convinces you that if anyone knew the full story, they would turn away. Yet, shame often thrives on silence, growing bigger in the dark. When someone responds with calm understanding, shame can shrink because the feared rejection does not arrive. That is why safe connection is one of the most surprising antidotes. Shame says hide. Healing often begins when you do the opposite. Guilt pushes repair, making it a social glue emotion. Guilt can feel heavy, but it has a hidden intelligence. It points toward a relationship that matters. When you feel guilty, your mind is recognizing that your actions affected someone else, and it urges you to make things right. That repair instinct is one reason groups can function at all. Without guilt, apologies would be rare and trust would shatter easily. With guilt, people return, explain, fix, and rebuild. The fascinating part is that guilt is future-focused. It is less about punishment and more about restoring balance. It can push you to replace what you broke, admit what you hid, or show up differently next time. In a way, guilt is a bridge back to belonging. Of course, guilt can also become distorted, especially when people blame themselves for things outside their control. But in its healthy form, guilt is a signal that your conscience is active and your relationships are real. It is the emotion that says, I want to be trustworthy again. Embarrassment can signal trustworthiness by showing you follow norms. It arrives like a sudden heat and it can feel like the worst spotlight in the world. Yet embarrassment is also a social signal that quietly repairs damage. When you trip, forget a name, or say something clumsy, the blush and the nervous smile tell everyone watching that you recognize the mistake. You are not ignoring the group's rules. You are aware and you care. That matters because groups run on prediction. People relax around someone who shows they understand what counts as awkward, rude, or out of place. Even a small cease can communicate. I know that landed wrong. In many situations, embarrassment prevents conflict because it offers an instant apology without words. It can also soften judgments. The person who looks appropriately embarrassed often seems more honest than someone who stays perfectly cool. Strange as it sounds, that uncomfortable flush can be a badge of belonging, proving you are tuned to the same shared expectations. Some people rarely visualize, yet still feel emotions deeply. Many people assume emotion is powered by mental pictures, like replaying scenes in the mind. But some people experience little or no voluntary imagery, and their emotional lives are still vivid. They may not picture a loved one's face on demand, yet they can feel tenderness when hearing their name. They may not visualize a frightening event, yet their body can still react with a racing pulse or a knot in the stomach when they recall it. This shows that emotion is not dependent on inner movies. It can be built from concepts, sounds, bodily sensations, and meaning. For some, memory feels more like knowing than seeing, more like a web of facts and feelings than a photograph. That difference can be surprising to discover because people rarely compare how their minds render experience. It is a gentle reminder that there are many ways to be human inside. The same feeling can be reached by different routes and none of them are less real. Sleep changes emotional reactivity, often lowering the next day's sharpness. A mite of sleep can quietly adjust the volume knob on your feelings. When you are rested, small annoyances often stay small. Comments that might have stung feel easier to hold. Problems look more workable, not because life became simpler, but because your brain regained its ability to regulate and reframe. When sleep is short or broken, the opposite can happen. Emotions can feel raw, faster, and harder to steer. The world seems louder inside your chest. This shift is one reason arguments flare more easily when people are exhausted. It is also why worries feel so persuasive at 3 o'clock in the morning. Sleep is not just rest for the body. It is maintenance for the emotional system, helping sort what happened, calm the alarm response, and reset the balance between impulse and control. You may still feel strong emotions after good sleep, but they tend to be less jagged. Rest can be the difference between a spark and a wildfire. A short nap can improve emotional regulation in many people. A brief nap can act like an internal reset button, especially after a heavy morning. It does not erase your problems, but it can change how your nervous system holds them. After even a modest nap, many people notice they respond with more patience and less snap. Frustrations that felt personal can look more neutral. The mind becomes less hungry for conflict and more able to pause before reacting. Part of the magic is that a nap interrupts the buildup of fatigue, which often pushes the brain toward shortcut judgments. It also gives your body a moment to settle out of stress chemistry and return closer to baseline. You can think of it like setting down a backpack you did not realize was digging into your shoulders. When you pick it up again, the weight is the same, but your posture is better. When you slump, your chest compresses, your breath often becomes shallower, and your muscles signal fatigue or defeat. When you sit tall, your lungs have more room, your neck relaxes differently, and your body sends a quieter message of readiness. This does not mean posture can force happiness. It means posture can tilt the starting conditions of your emotional state. You can test it in a simple way. Try curling inward while thinking about a difficult conversation. Then try imagining the same conversation while standing grounded and open. The thoughts may be similar, but the feeling can shift. Posture also affects how others respond to you, which loops back into emotion. A collapsed posture can invite less engagement, while a steady posture can invite more. In that way, posture becomes a social signal as well as a private one. It is fascinating that something as silent as a spine can change the story your nervous system tells about safety, confidence, and possibility. Emotional reactions differ across cultures, even for the same face. A smile, a stare, a lowered gaze. These can mean different things depending on where you learn social life. In one culture, direct eye contact can feel honest and engaged. In another, it can feel disrespectful or aggressive, especially toward elders or authority. That means the same facial expression can land as warmth in one place and challenge in another. Your brain does not only read the muscles of a face, it reads the rules you were raised with. That is why travel can feel emotionally confusing at first. You might misread friendliness as flirtation or formality as coldness simply because the social code is unfamiliar. Over time, people often learn new emotional dictionaries, noticing smaller cues like distance, timing, and tone. It is a beautiful reminder that emotion is both biological and learned. Faces are universal, but meanings are negotiated by communities. Some cultures value calm emotions more than high excitement. In some places, the ideal mood is not loud happiness. It is steadiness. A calm face can signal maturity, self-respect, and reliability, while intense enthusiasm can seem careless or childish. In those cultures, people may learn to keep joy quiet like a candle instead of fireworks. This shapes how families celebrate, how friends praise each other, and how leaders are expected to speak. A person can feel deep happiness and still show it gently because the social reward goes to composure. That does not mean they are less joyful. It means they have been taught that being emotionally balanced protects the group. Meanwhile, cultures that celebrate high-energy excitement may interpret calm as boredom or disapproval even when it is actually approval. This difference can create misunderstandings in workplaces and relationships across cultures. Once you notice it, you start hearing emotional values in everyday behavior. The volume of feeling is not the feeling itself. It is the style a culture prefers. Languages divide emotions differently, shaping how people describe feelings. Some languages have words for emotions that others can only describe in full sentences. When a language gives a feeling its own name, it becomes easier to notice and easier to share. The word acts like a container. It separates that feeling from nearby ones and makes it feel like a recognizable thing rather than a blur. This is one reason people can hear a new emotional word and suddenly think, "Oh, that is me." The experience was there, but the map was missing. Different languages also place boundaries in different places. What one language treats as one emotion, another may treat as several. That changes how people tell stories about their inner lives, how they ask for help, and how they interpret conflict. Language does not invent emotion from nothing, but it can tune attention and memory. It shapes what feels speakable. When a feeling becomes speakable, it becomes easier to handle. People can learn to detect emotions better with training. Reading emotion is a skill, not a fixed talent. Some people start out naturally sensitive, but many improve dramatically when they practice noticing the right signals. Training often begins by slowing down. Instead of guessing from a whole face at once, You learn to watch specific shifts like tension around the mouth, the speed of blinking, or a sudden stillness in the body. You also learn to check your assumptions. A neutral face is not always anger. Quiet is not always sadness. With practice, people become better at asking gentle, clarifying questions rather than mind reading. This skill matters because it changes relationships. When you accurately notice that someone is overwhelmed, not rude, you respond with patience instead of defensiveness. When you notice that excitement is hiding behind nervousness, you can encourage instead of dismiss. Emotion detection also improves leadership, parenting, and teamwork. It is like learning a second language that everyone is speaking silently. The more fluent you become, the less conflict you create by accident. Emotion recognition can drop when you are sleep deprived. When you are short on sleep, your brain starts taking shortcuts. It becomes less precise at reading subtle social cues, and that can distort your emotional world. A tired mind may interpret a neutral expression as hostile or miss signs of friendliness entirely. This is one reason late-night arguments can feel so intense. You are not only reacting to the topic, you are reacting to a weakened ability to read intent. Sleep loss also reduces patience, which means you have less room to pause and recheck your interpretation. The result is a risky combination. You misread people more often and you correct yourself less often. Even small misreadings can snowball. A seaworker looks serious. You assume they are annoyed. You respond coldly and the whole exchange hardens. The next day after rest, the same face might look simply focused. It is humbling how much emotional intelligence depends on basic recovery. Sleep is not only for energy, it is for accuracy and human connection. Oxytocin can increase trust, but not toward everyone equally. Oxytocin is often described as a bonding chemical, and it does support closeness. It can strengthen feelings of connection during touch, caregiving, and shared moments of safety. But it does not simply make people universally kinder. In many studies, its trusting effects depend on context, especially whether someone feels like part of your group. It can deepen loyalty, which is beautiful inside friendships and families. Yet, it can also sharpen boundaries between us and them. That makes oxytocin less like a moral potion and more like a relationship amplifier. It boosts whatever social priorities are already active. If your environment feels safe and inclusive, it can promote openness. If your environment feels threatened, it can promote protectiveness. This is fascinating because it shows that trust is not only a choice, it is also chemistry responding to perceived belonging. Understanding this can soften self-judgment. Feeling close to some people and cautious with others is not always hypocrisy. It is often a biological system calibrated by experience. Dopamine is about motivation and learning, not just pleasure. Dopamine is often blamed for chasing pleasure, but its deeper job is to guide pursuit and learning. It rises when something seems worth doing, when a goal feels possible, or when you're about to gain new information. That is why dopamine can spike during searching, planning, and anticipating, not only during getting. It helps stamp lessons into the brain by highlighting what mattered. If an action leads to a better outcome than expected, dopamine can signal, remember this path. If an outcome disappoints, the signal changes, adjusting future behavior. This makes dopamine less like a reward and more like a teacher with a highlighter. It is also why novelty feels energizing. New experiences offer fresh predictions to test, and dopamine loves a prediction. In emotional life, this can be tricky. You can become attached to the chase of reassurance, the chase of approval, the chase of the next exciting thing, even when the satisfaction is brief. Understanding dopamine helps you see why wanting can feel good and why calm contentment can require different habits. Stress hormones can lock attention onto threats and uncertainties. Under stress, your mind can become a narrow hallway with one door. It keeps returning to the same worry, the same risk, the same unanswered question. Stress hormones help your body prepare for challenge, but they also influence attention, making potential threats stand out like bright red signs. This can be useful in truly dangerous situations. Yet, in modern life, it often targets emails, social tension, finances, or health worries. The brain starts scanning for what could go wrong, then treating that scan as proof that something is wrong. That is how uncertainty becomes sticky. You may notice yourself rereading a message, replaying a conversation, or checking information repeatedly, hoping certainty will appear. but the checking can deepen the loop. The more you look for danger, the more danger you find. This is why stress can feel like a lens that darkens everything it touches. The path out often involves changing what your body is signaling, not just what your mind is thinking. When stress hormones lower, attention can widen again, and the world stops looking like a checklist of threats. The amygdala can react before your cortex finishes processing. Sometimes your body startles before you know what startled you. A loud sound, a sudden movement, an unfamiliar shadow, and your muscles tense instantly. This is partly because the amygdala can trigger rapid alarm responses using rough, fast information without waiting for detailed analysis. It is like an early warning siren that prefers false alarms over missed danger. The cortex, which handles finer interpretation, arrives a beat later with context. That is when you realize it was only a dropped object, a harmless stranger, or a coat on a chair. This timing difference can feel like your body is betraying you, but it is actually a survival design. The quick reaction buys time. The slower interpretation decides what to do next. This also explains why phobias and panic can feel so convincing. The alarm is already ringing and your mind is scrambling to find a reason for the ringing. The trick is learning to respect the alarm without obeying it blindly. You can acknowledge the surge and still wait for the fuller story. The prefrontal cortex helps you choose responses instead of reflexes. There is a part of you that can pause even when emotion is loud. The prefrontal cortex supports planning, inhibition, and the ability to hold more than one perspective at once. It is what helps you feel anger and still speak with care. It is what helps you feel fear and still take a deliberate step forward. In the moment, this can feel like creating space between the spark and the action. That space is where choice lives. When the prefrontal cortex is fatigued by stress, anger, or overload, reflexes take over more easily. You say the thing you regret. You interpret quickly and harshly. You forget the long view. When it is supported, you become more flexible. You can consider consequences. You can imagine the other person's internal world. You can decide how you want to be, not just how you feel right now. This is one reason routines that reduce cognitive strain can improve emotional life. It is not about becoming unemotional. It is about becoming more able to steer emotion toward your values. Emotional suppression can increase body stress even if you look calm. Some people become experts at appearing fine. The voice stays steady, the face stays neutral, the conversation stays polite. But inside, the effort of holding emotion down can keep the body working hard. Suppression is not the same as peace. It is control, and control costs energy. When you clamp down on anger, fear, or sadness, your nervous system may stay activated even while your expression stays smooth. Over time, this can feel like carrying a secret weight because the emotion does not vanish. It simply moves into muscle tension, shallow breathing, and a restless sense of being on guard. Suppression can also backfire socially. People around you may sense distance and assume they did something wrong, which creates more strain. The alternative is not uncontrolled outbursts. It is expression with skill, like naming what is happening, setting boundaries, or letting the body release safely. Calm that is real usually feels softer than calm that is forced. Naming a feeling can reduce its intensity for some people. When a feeling is unnamed, it can feel like fog filling a room. You know something is wrong, but you cannot locate it, and that vagueness makes it bigger. Giving the feeling a precise name can change your relationship to it. Suddenly, it is not everything. It is something. Frustration is different from shame. Disappointment is different from dread. That small act of clarity can create distance, like stepping back from a painting to see the edges. Naming also invites curiosity. If you can name it, you can ask what it wants, what triggered it, and what it might be protecting. For some people, that shift alone lowers the temperature of the emotion. The brain stops scanning wildly for explanations because it has one. This is not a magic trick that works every time, but when it works, it feels like turning on a light. Not to banish the feeling, but to make it less frightening. A named emotion becomes a visitor you can meet rather than a storm you must endure blindly. A sincere apology can calm anger by restoring predictability. Anger often rises when someone feels wronged and uncertain about what happens next. Will they deny it? Will they do it again? Will you be safe in this relationship? A sincere apology can answer those questions quickly. It shows recognition of harm and signals a change in future behavior, which helps the brain relax its guard. That is why a real apology feels different from excuses. Excuses keep the uncertainty alive. A sincere apology can also restore dignity. It tells the hurt person, "You are not invisible and your experience counts." In that moment, anger can soften because its job is partially done. It was trying to demand acknowledgement and protection. Apologies are powerful because humans are prediction-hungry creatures. We want to know the rules of tomorrow. A clean apology offers a new rule, and the nervous system often responds with immediate relief. This does not erase consequences or repair everything instantly, but it can change the emotional weather from combat to possibility, which is the first step toward rebuilding. Fairness triggers strong emotion even in very young children. Fairness is not a polished adult idea. It appears early, like a built-in alarm for imbalance. Even young children can react intensely when they see someone get more, cut in line, or change the rules mid-aim. The emotion is immediate because fairness is tied to safety. If resources and care are distributed unpredictably, the world feels unstable. That is why unfairness can spark anger, sadness, and a fierce need to correct the situation. It is also why children often become passionate rule keepers. The rules are not just rules. They are a promise, but the social world is understandable. What makes this fascinating is how fairness emotions shape identity. A child who sees fairness upheld learns that cooperation works. A child who sees unfairness rewarded learns suspicion. These lessons can echo for decades, affecting how adults trust systems, handle conflict, and decide whether to share. Fairness is not only morality. It is the emotional foundation of living together. People punish unfairness even when it costs them personally. Humans sometimes choose justice over advantage even when the choice stings. In certain experiments and real-life situations, people will give up rewards to prevent someone else from benefiting unfairly. That behavior looks irrational if you only measure gain. But it becomes understandable if you measure the value of the social world. Punishing unfairness sends a message that cheating has a price, which protects the group long-term. It can also protect self-respect. Some people would rather lose a little than accept a world where rules mean nothing. This is why unfair deals can trigger a strong no, even when taking the deal would be better than taking nothing. The emotion behind it is often a mix of anger and principle, a refusal to be treated as less than equal. The fascinating part is that this instinct can be both noble and dangerous. It can defend the vulnerable, but it can also fuel grudges. Either way, it proves that humans are not only reward seekers. We are rule builders who care about the kind of world our choices create. Trust is emotional but also built from repeated tiny evidence. Trust rarely arrives as a single dramatic decision. It is assembled from small moments that seem ordinary while they are happening. Someone shows up when they said they would. Someone keeps a secret. Someone admits a mistake without twisting the story. Each moment is a tiny vote that says this person is predictable and safe. Over time, those votes form a feeling in the body. Your shoulders loosen around them. Your mind stops scanning for hidden meaning. Trust becomes a resting place. That is why betrayal feels so shocking. It breaks not only a promise but a long chain of evidence your nervous system relied on. Trust is also shaped by timing. Quick repairs after missteps can strengthen it, while delays can poison it because silence breeds uncertainty. The fascinating part is that trust is both delicate and durable. A single rupture can damage it. Yet consistent care can rebuild it, not through grand speeches, but through the slow, steady proof of everyday behavior. Betrayal hurts because the brain treats it like danger. Betrayal is not only disappointment. It is an alarm that says the map you were using is no longer reliable. When someone you relied on turns, lies, or abandons you, your nervous system can react as if you are physically threatened. Sleep becomes harder. Thoughts become intrusive. Your mind replays clues, searching for what you missed because it wants to prevent the danger from happening again. Betrayal also attacks the sense of reality. If this person was safe yesterday and unsafe today, what else might change? Without warning, that uncertainty can make the world feel unstable for a while, even in unrelated situations. The pain is intense because connection is not just emotional decoration. It is part of how humans survive. Losing trust can feel like losing ground under your feet. Yet betrayal can also reveal something important. Your brain is not overreacting. It is protecting you from repeating a pattern that could harm you again. Healing often begins when you rebuild a reliable map, either with new boundaries, new relationships, or a clearer understanding of what you will and will not accept. Humans sense social rank shifts and feel it in the body. A tiny change in how someone speaks to you can land like a physical push. One day you feel included, the next you feel talked over and your stomach notices before your mind explains it. This sensitivity comes from how deeply we track status and safety in groups. A raised eyebrow, an interrupted sentence, a chair placed slightly farther away, these can signal that your position has shifted. The body answers with heat, tension, or a sudden urge to prove yourself. What makes this so fascinating is how fast it happens. Even in polite settings where nobody says anything openly, your nervous system reads rank like weather because rank once determined access to protection and resources. You can even feel relief when status improves, not because you became vain overnight, but because the body interprets respect as security. Social rank is not only an idea, it is a sensation. Loneliness can heighten threat detection, making faces seem less friendly. Loneliness is not simply the absence of company. It can change how the world looks at you. When you feel isolated, your brain may start scanning for rejection because it is trying to prevent more disconnection. The result can be a quiet distortion. Neutral faces look colder. Unclear messages feel pointed. A delayed reply seems like proof of dislike. This is not because lonely people are unreasonable. It is because the nervous system is on guard and guarded brains interpret ambiguity as danger. That shift can create a painful loop. You expect exclusion. You withdraw. Others read that withdrawal as distance and the gap grows. What makes this especially heartbreaking is how invisible it is from the outside. A lonely person may look calm while their mind is constantly measuring social risk. Understanding this can add tenderness to everyday interactions. A small warm gesture can matter more than you think because it interrupts the threat scan with evidence of welcome. Touch can reduce distress by activating safety pathways. A steady hand on the shoulder can calm a storm that words cannot reach. Touch carries a direct message to the nervous system, one that does not require explanation. It can signal you are protected, you are seen, you are not facing this alone. That is why a hug can soften grief. Why holding hands can steady fear, and why a gentle pat can soothe a startled child. The body reads safe touch as evidence of connection, and connection often lowers the urge to brace for danger. What makes touch fascinating is how specific it is. Not all touch comforts. It must feel wanted and safe, or it can do the opposite. But when it is welcome, it can change breathing, heart rhythm, and muscle tension quickly, like turning down a loud alarm. Touch also creates a shared rhythm. Two bodies syncing in pressure and timing. In that sync, distress often loses some of its sharpness. Eye contact can intensify emotion by boosting attention and arousal. Eye contact is not just looking. It is a meeting. When two people lock eyes, attention narrows and the moment becomes heavier with meaning. A compliment feels warmer. An insult feels sharper. Silence feels louder. This happens because eye contact signals relevance. And relevance wakes up the nervous system. It tells your brain, pay attention. Something important is here. That is why some people avoid eye contact when they feel vulnerable. It can feel like being seen too clearly, too quickly. Eye contact can also create connection without words. In a crowded room, a single glance can offer reassurance, invite play, or warn someone to stop. It is fascinating that the same action can feel intimate or threatening depending on context. With a friend, eye contact can feel like home. With a stranger in a tense situation, it can feel like a challenge. Your eyes are not only windows. They are signals and the body listens. A familiar voice can calm the nervous system quickly. There are voices that your body recognizes as shelter. You hear them and your shoulders drop a little. Even if the day is still hard, that calming effect is not only emotional. It is learned safety. Over time, certain voices become linked with comfort, help, and steady presence. So, the brain treats their sound as evidence that things may be okay. This is why people call home when they feel overwhelmed, even if they do not know what to say. The voice itself becomes the medicine. A familiar voice also carries signature rhythms. The pauses, the softness, the way certain words are shaped. And those patterns can guide your breathing back toward calm. It is fascinating that comfort can travel through air. No touch, no visual cues, just vibration and memory. This is also why harsh voices can be so activating. The nervous system learns who has been safe and it responds before you finish the first sentence. Conflict can escalate when each person mirrors the other's intensity. Arguments often grow not because the topic changes, but because the energy changes. One person tightens their voice. The other answers with sharper tone, and suddenly the room feels smaller. Each response becomes a cue that says danger is rising. So both nervous systems accelerate. Volume climbs. Interruptions multiply. Curiosity disappears. This is emotional mirroring. Not in the sense of copying words, but copying intensity. Your body sees their heat and assumes you must raise yours to be heard or protected. The tragedy is that the escalation feels logical from the inside. Each person thinks they're responding to the other's aggression, yet both are feeding the same loop. Conflict can also turn into a performance where backing down feels like losing. What breaks the loop is often unexpected softness, a slower reply, a question instead of a claim, a brief pause that signals control. That pause can feel risky, but it is powerful. It changes the rhythm, and rhythm changes everything. Hope is not denial. It is a strategy for endurance. Hope is often misunderstood as pretending everything is fine. Real hope is different. It is the decision to keep moving while the outcome is still uncertain. Hope holds the possibility of change without demanding guarantees. That makes it a powerful emotional tool because it gives effort a reason to exist. When people lose hope, they often stop trying, not from laziness but from exhaustion. Hope offers a small bridge between now and later, and that bridge can carry you through pain, waiting, and fear. It is also practical. Hope helps the brain search for options instead of freezing. It keeps attention open enough to notice help, to accept support, to take the next step. What makes hope so fascinating is that it can be quiet. It does not need grand confidence. Sometimes hope is simply getting up, making one choice, and refusing to let the story end at the hardest chapter. Humor can reframe fear by changing the story's meaning. Fear turns the world into a threat map. Humor redraws the map. It does not erase the risk, but it shifts the meaning of the moment. And meaning is what fear feeds on. A joke can turn a looming problem into something you can approach because it breaks the spell of seriousness that makes fear feel absolute. Humor also gives you a sense of control. If you can laugh, you are not fully trapped. You are observing, not only suffering. That distance can be enough to calm the body and reopen thinking. Humor also works socially. In a worried group, one well-placed light moment can loosen everyone's shoulders, reminding them they are still together. The fascinating part is that humor often appears exactly when things are hardest, like a pressure valve. It is the mind's way of saying, I see the danger, but I refuse to let it define me completely. Reframing is not denial. It is resilience with a smile. Emotional habits form, making certain feelings easier to enter. If you have ever noticed yourself slipping into the same mood in the same place, you have seen an emotional habit at work. The brain loves efficiency, so it builds shortcuts between cues and states. A particular chair becomes linked with worry because you have worried there before. A certain time of day becomes linked with heaviness because that is when stress usually peaks. Eventually, the feeling arrives quickly, like a familiar song starting after the first note. These habits are not destiny, but they are real pathways that become smoother with repetition. The surprising part is that emotional habits can form around good states too. Some people train their nervous system to soften when they make tea, step outside, or start a bedtime routine. The cue becomes a doorway into calm. Changing an emotional habit often begins with noticing the cue, then doing something small and different right at the start. That tiny change interrupts the autopilot and gives the brain a new option. The brain predicts emotions by comparing now to past patterns. Your brain is constantly asking a quiet question. What does this situation resemble? It matches the present to old experiences, then prepares an emotional response before you finish understanding what is happening. A friendly smile from a stranger may feel safe if your history says smiles usually mean kindness. The same smile may feel suspicious if your history says smiles often came with hidden costs. This is why two people can read the same room so differently. Their brains are using different libraries of patterns. Prediction can also create strange mistakes. You might feel anxious before a meeting that is genuinely supportive because your body is remembering older meetings that were tense. The emotion arrives as a prediction, not a verdict. Once you see this, you can treat feelings as hypotheses. They are guesses about what will happen next, shaped by memory. Sometimes the guess is wise, sometimes it is outdated. The fascinating part is that your brain keeps updating when it gets enough new evidence, which means emotional change is possible even when the first prediction feels automatic. Chronic stress can dull pleasure, a change called anhedonia. When stress becomes a constant background hum, the world can lose some of its color. Things that once felt rewarding, music, food, conversation, even rest, may feel oddly flat. This is not laziness, and it is not a lack of gratitude. It can be the nervous system protecting itself by turning down the sensitivity of reward. Chronic stress keeps the body in a state of readiness, and readiness is expensive. Over time, the brain may prioritize threat detection over enjoyment because enjoyment does not help you survive an emergency. The tragedy is that when the emergency never ends, the reward system stays muted. People often describe it as living behind glass, watching life without tasting it fully. The hopeful part is that dull pleasure is not always permanent. When safety returns, when sleep improves, when stress decreases, the brain can gradually relearn reward. Small enjoyable moments repeated gently can become signals that it is safe to feel good again. Emotional numbness can be protective during overwhelming experiences. Sometimes the most surprising reaction to something intense is feeling almost nothing. You might expect tears or panic, yet instead there is quiet emptiness as if the mind stepped back. This can be emotional numbness, and it is often the brain's way of preventing overload. When pain, fear, or shock exceeds what the system can process in the moment, shutting down feeling can be a temporary shield. It can allow you to do what must be done. Make phone calls, handle logistics, get through the day. The numbness is not proof that you do not care. In many cases, it is proof that you care so much that your nervous system is rationing feeling like a scarce resource. Later, when safety increases, emotion often returns in waves, sometimes triggered by something small like a psalm or a quiet room. That delayed return can be confusing, but it shows the protection lifting. Numbness is not the end of emotion. It is a pause button pressed by a system trying to keep you functioning. Some people cry from happiness because arousal spills over. Sometimes joy arrives with so much intensity that the body borrows the machinery of tears to release it. This can happen at reunions, weddings, surprise, kindness, or the moment a long fear finally resolves into relief and gratitude. The nervous system does not have a special outlet reserved only for happiness. It has a few powerful release valves, and crying is one of them. When arousal runs high, your breathing changes, your chest tightens, and your eyes may water as the body tries to regulate the surge. It can feel strange to cry when nothing is wrong. Yet, the tears can be a sign of how much the moment matters. Happiness tears often show up when the emotion is mixed with something else, like awe, gratitude, or the sudden realization of what could have been lost. They also appear when the body is finally allowed to stop bracing. The tears are not sadness in disguise. They are the nervous system exhaling through the eyes. Anger can cover fear, acting like emotional armor. Anger can feel strong and clean, which makes it an appealing mask. Fear is vulnerable. It admits you could be hurt. Anger feels like power, like you are ready to fight back. In many people, anger rises when fear is present, but hard to tolerate. A person feels threatened in a conversation, and instead of saying "I am scared," the voice hardens and the words sharpen. The anger becomes armor, protecting the tender part underneath from exposure. This is why some arguments are really about safety, not about winning. The anger is doing a job trying to keep control when control feels shaky. The trouble is that armor can frighten the very people who could help. Anger pushes others away, which can increase the original fear of being alone, rejected, or powerless. Learning to notice the fear beneath anger is like finding a hidden lever. When you can name the vulnerability, the need becomes clearer. You can set boundaries without becoming a weapon. You can ask for reassurance without shame. Anger is often a guard dog. Fear is often the reason it was hired. Jealousy can arise from uncertainty, not just possessiveness. Jealousy is often framed as wanting to own someone, but it frequently begins with not knowing where you stand. When the brain cannot predict whether a bond is secure, it starts scanning for rivals and threats. A harmless interaction becomes suspicious. A laugh across the room feels like a signal. The emotion is not always about control. It is often about stability. Jealousy is the nervous system saying, "This connection matters and I am not sure it is safe." That uncertainty can come from real patterns, mixed signals, broken trust, or old wounds that taught you closeness can disappear. Jealousy also tends to focus attention narrowly, making you collect evidence that supports the fear while ignoring evidence that contradicts it. That is why it can feel so convincing. The path through jealousy often involves clarity. Clear agreements, honest reassurance, and consistent behavior give the brain the predictability it craves. When security increases, jealousy often fades without needing force. It is remarkable how many emotions soften when the future becomes less mysterious. Compassion can be trained like a skill that strengthens. Compassion is not only something you either have or lack. It can grow with practice because the brain changes with repeated attention. When you deliberately notice suffering, including your own, and respond with a wish for relief, you are building a mental habit that becomes easier to access later. Over time, compassion can become more automatic, like a reflex of care rather than a rare virtue. Training often begins small. You practice with people you already like, then gradually extend that warmth outward, learning to hold boundaries without losing humanity. Compassion training can also change how you respond to your own mistakes. Instead of harsh self-punishment, you learn to treat errors as moments for correction and care. This matters because self-compassion often determines how quickly you recover from setbacks. Compassion does not mean approving of harmful actions. It means recognizing the reality of pain and responding with steadiness instead of cruelty. A trained compassion can make you braver because you know you will not abandon yourself or others when things get hard. Empathy has limits and burnout can shrink it. Empathy feels like a window into another person's inner world. But that window can fog when you are exhausted. Burnout often reduces empathy not because you became colder but because your emotional resources are depleted. When the brain is running on empty, it narrows attention to survival tasks. Other people's feelings start to feel like extra weight, and even small requests can trigger irritation or numbness. This can be especially painful for caregivers, teachers, and anyone who usually prides themselves on being supportive. They may notice they are less patient, less moved, less able to listen without feeling overwhelmed. That change can create guilt, which adds another layer of strain. The important truth is that empathy is not an infinite reservoir. It is supported by sleep, boundaries, time, and a sense of being cared for too. When you refill those foundations, empathy often returns naturally. Burnout is not proof you stopped caring. It is often proof you cared for too long without enough recovery. Kindness can boost mood partly by giving a sense of agency. Kindness can feel good for reasons deeper than being nice. When you help someone, you experience yourself as capable of making a difference. And that sense of agency can brighten mood. It is the opposite of helplessness, which often feeds sadness and anxiety. A small act, holding a door, sending a thoughtful message, offering encouragement, becomes evidence that you can influence the emotional climate around you. Kindness also shifts attention outward, which can interrupt rumination, the endless turning of the mind around its own worries. In that outward focus, the nervous system often relaxes. There is also a quiet identity effect. Each kind act reinforces a story about who you are, and stories shape emotion. People who see themselves as helpful often feel more stable during stress because they can still choose their behavior even when they cannot control outcomes. Kindness is not a cure, and it should never be used to ignore your own needs. But it is fascinating that something so simple can change inner state, not through magic but through the experience of being an active participant in the world. Surprise resets attention, preparing the brain to learn fast. Surprise resets attention, preparing the brain to learn fast. It is the mental equivalent of a sudden head tone, pulling every resource toward the unexpected. For a moment, the usual autopilot loosens because the brain needs new information right now. That is why a plot twist can make you sit up straighter and why a sudden change in someone's tone can make you replay the last few seconds. Surprise is not only a feeling. It is a rapid update mechanism. It clears space for fresh learning by briefly suspending assumptions, almost like wiping a chalkboard clean. This is also why surprise can feel thrilling or unsettling depending on what follows. If the outcome is safe, surprise becomes delight. If the outcome is dangerous, surprise becomes alarm. Either way, it sharpens you. It makes the present moment louder than the past. When used gently, surprise can even help new habits form because it breaks the old pattern long enough for a new one to slip in. Curiosity feels good because it promises a future reward. Curiosity feels good because it promises a future reward. It is an itch made of questions, and the mind loves the moment it senses an answer might be nearby. That promise creates a warm tension, pulling attention forward like a magnet. You can feel it when you hear half a story, see a door slightly open, or notice a detail that does not fit. The brain begins building a bridge from not knowing to knowing. And that bridge itself is emotionally satisfying. Curiosity also changes how effort feels. Tasks that would be exhausting become energizing when they are framed as discovery. You search longer. You focus deeper. You tolerate uncertainty because it feels like progress rather than danger. This is why mysteries keep people awake and why puzzles can feel soothing. Curiosity is the emotion that turns the unknown into an invitation. It does not demand certainty right away. It promises that meaning is possible, and that promise can feel like a small light in the mind. Regret can teach replaying choices to refine future decisions. Regret can teach replaying choices to refine future decisions. It is the mind's way of returning to a crossroads and studying the path not taken. The replay can hurt, but it is also a form of learning because the brain is trying to update its rules for next time. Regret often highlights values. You regret what clashes with who you want to be, not what is meaningless to you. That is why the same mistake can be forgotten by one person and carried for years by another. Regret also has a strange precision. It tends to focus on a single moment, a sentence you said, a chance you ignored, a pause you filled poorly. That focus can be useful when it leads to a clearer plan, like setting a boundary earlier or asking the harder question. The danger is when regret becomes punishment instead of instruction. When it stays in learning mode, regret can become a quiet teacher that makes you wiser without making you smaller. Comparison can steal joy by moving the goalposts endlessly. Comparison can steal joy by moving the goalposts endlessly. The mind looks sideways and decides that your life should be measured against someone else's highlight, speed, or luck. Even when you achieve something meaningful, comparison can whisper that it does not count because another person has more. That whisper drains satisfaction before it has time to settle. Comparison also shrinks gratitude. Instead of noticing what is working, attention becomes a searchlight for what is missing, and the target keeps shifting because there will always be someone ahead in some category. What makes this so tricky is that comparison feels like information, feels practical, like a way to stay motivated, but the emotional cost can be high. It can turn growth into anxiety and success into restlessness. The way out is not pretending others do not exist. It is changing the measurement. When you compare yourself to your own progress, your own values, your own effort, the goalposts stop running away. Joy returns when it is allowed to be enough. Superstitions often grow when people feel powerless or uncertain. Superstitions often grow when people feel powerless or uncertain. When outcomes are unpredictable, the mind searches for patterns it can control. A lucky shirt becomes a shield. A repeated phrase becomes a charm. A small ritual feels like a lever you can pull in a world that will not explain itself. This does not mean people are foolish. It means the brain is desperate to reduce uncertainty because uncertainty is stressful. Superstition can offer immediate relief by creating a sense of influence, even if the influence is imagined. It can also create a story that makes randomness feel less cruel. The trouble is that superstition can expand, demanding more rituals and more avoidance until the person feels trapped by their own protections. Yet, it reveals something tender about human emotion. People want safety. They want predictability. When they cannot find it, they sometimes build it out of symbols. Understanding this can replace mockery with compassion. A superstition is often a coping strategy wearing a costume. Ritual grief practices help communities share emotional load. Ritual grief practices help communities share emotional load. When loss is too heavy for one heart to carry alone, shared actions distribute the weight. Funerals, memorial meals, candles, songs, and quiet gatherings give sorrow a container so it does not spill everywhere at once. These practices also give people something to do when words are inadequate. A hug, a shared silence, a hand on a shoulder. These become a language that says you are not alone in this. Ritual grief is also a form of permission. It tells the grieving person that tears are acceptable, that memory is honored, that love is recognized. Without ritual, grief can become isolating because people do not know how to approach it. With ritual, the community has a map. Everyone knows where to stand, what to bring, how to show care. The fascinating part is that ritual does not remove pain. It transforms it into connection. It turns private suffering into shared witness. And shared witness is one of the oldest comforts humans have. Storytelling moves emotions because the brain simulates the experience. Storytelling moves emotions because the brain simulates the experience. When you follow a character through danger or tenderness, your mind builds an inner version of the scene and your body responds as if it matters. Your breathing changes during suspense. Your chest warms during reunion. Your jaw tightens during betrayal. Even though you know it is a story, your nervous system still practices the feelings. This is why stories can heal and harm. A gentle story can soothe you into safety. A terrifying story can keep your body on alert long after it ends. Storytelling is also social technology. It lets one person transmit an emotional lesson to many others without anyone needing to live the event themselves. You learn what courage looks like, what kindness costs, what pride can ruin, what love can survive. The fascinating part is that stories do not only entertain. They shape empathy by letting you feel from inside another perspective. For a while, you borrow someone else's inner world, and that borrowing can change how you treat real people afterward. Memories become emotional again each time you recall them. Memories become emotional again each time you recall them. When you bring the past into the present, the nervous system often reactivates part of the original feeling as if the body is checking whether the old lesson still applies. That is why a childhood embarrassment can still make your face warm and why a remembered kindness can still soften your eyes. Recall is not a neutral act. It is a re-entry. The brain opens the file and emotion can spill out with it. This can be useful because it keeps important lessons alive. It can also be exhausting when you repeatedly revisit painful scenes because each revisit refreshes the stress response. The surprising opportunity is that recall can sometimes change the memory's emotional tone over time. If you remember an event while feeling safe and supported, the brain may gradually link the old story with new safety, loosening the grip of the original distress. This is not rewriting history. It is updating the emotional context around history. The past stays the past, but your body learns it is not happening right now. Your emotional baseline is partly inherited, but still changeable. Even if you grew up in the same house as a sibling, you may have noticed how differently you each react. Some people are naturally more sensitive to stress. Others recover faster, and some tend to feel upbeat without trying. Part of that starting point is influenced by the biology you inherit, like the default settings on the new instrument. But an instrument is not a song. Your baseline shifts through experience, relationships, habits, and the environments you spend your days inside. A supportive community can slowly lift a low baseline. Chronic strain can quietly drag a high baseline down. The brain is constantly adapting and emotional patterns can be reshaped through repeated signals of safety, meaning, and mastery. This is why two people with similar temperaments can end up with very different emotional lives over time. In a gentle way, heredity is the first chapter, not the whole book. Hormonal cycles can shift emotional sensitivity across the month. Some days the same comment lands like a feather. Other days it lands like a stone. That change is not always about weakness or attitude. Hormonal shifts can influence sleep quality, energy, appetite, and how strongly the nervous system reacts to stress. For some people, emotions become closer to the surface at certain points in the cycle, like the volume has been turned up. Tears come faster, irritation sparks sooner, and comfort matters more. For others, the shift shows up as fogginess, restlessness, or a sense of being less emotionally buffered. What makes this fascinating is that it can change your interpretation of reality. A worry that felt manageable last week may feel urgent today. Recognizing the pattern does not dismiss the feeling. It adds context like weather reports for the inner world. When you track sensitivity over time, you often gain a new kind of self-trust. You realize you are not inconsistent. You are rhythmic. Adolescence amplifies emotion because control systems mature later. Adolescence can feel like living with a louder emotional stereo. Joy becomes huge, embarrassment becomes volcanic, and rejection can feel like the end of the world. This happens partly because the systems that generate intense feelings become highly responsive while the systems that help slow, plan, and regulate are still maturing. It is like having a powerful engine before the brakes are fully tuned. That mismatch can lead to impulsive choices, passionate creativity, and dramatic shifts in identity, sometimes all in the same week. It can also make teenagers surprisingly brave because intense emotion can overpower caution. What looks like overreaction from the outside can feel like absolute reality from the inside. The fascinating part is that this intensity is not only chaos. It is a developmental phase that helps young people separate from childhood, explore social worlds, and build personal values. Strong emotion becomes the fuel for becoming someone new. Older adults often remember positive emotions more than negative ones. As people age, many begin to store the sweetness of life more strongly than the sting. They may still remember hard events, but the emotional highlight reel often leans warmer. A small kindness, a funny moment, a peaceful afternoon can become easier to recall than minor annoyances. This shift is sometimes called a positivity effect, and it can change how older adults make decisions, choose relationships, and spend their attention. The brain begins to treat time as more precious, so emotional priorities can change. Instead of chasing novelty or status, many people seek meaning, calm, and connection. That does not mean older adults ignore problems. It means they may become less interested in feeding bitterness because the cost feels too high. The fascinating part is how this can alter memory itself. When you repeatedly revisit what is good, you strengthen those pathways and the mind becomes more practiced at returning there. In a quiet way, aging can bring emotional wisdom that is built from attention. Trauma can link neutral cues to fear through rapid learning. After a frightening experience, the brain can become a detective who never clocks out. A harmless smell, a certain street corner, a type of ringtone. Even a particular time of day can start triggering fear because the nervous system connected that cue with danger. The cue might have been present only once, but the emotional learning can be strong because the body prefers false alarms over missed threats. This is why some people feel a surge of panic in situations that look safe to everyone else. The brain is not reacting to the present alone. It is reacting to a pattern it believes predicts harm. What makes this so haunting is that the cue can be subtle and the person may not consciously know what set them off. The good news is that these links can loosen with healing, safety, and careful retraining. New experiences can teach the nervous system that the cue no longer leads to danger. Recovery often looks like the brain slowly updating its predictions one calm moment at a time. Phobias can form from one vivid event or many small ones. A phobia can feel irrational until you understand how the brain learns fear. Sometimes a single intense experience stamps a powerful association like a snapshot burned into memory. Other times, fear grows from repeated smaller moments, each adding a drop to the same bucket. A child who is startled by a barking dog once may later feel their body tense near any dog. Another child may become afraid after many uneasy encounters, even if none were dramatic. The fear becomes a protective rule, and the nervous system follows it automatically. What makes phobias fascinating is how specific they can be. The brain can attach alarm to one object, one situation, or one sensation, then generalize outward. Avoidance then strengthens the fear because the person never gets the chance to collect new evidence of safety. Yet, phobias can also weaken through careful exposure and support because the brain is capable of learning safety too. A phobia is not a character flaw. It is fear learning that got too good at its job. Emotions guide moral choices faster than deliberate reasoning. When you witness unfairness or cruelty, you often feel something before you can explain it. That first surge is not just decoration. It can be the engine of moral action. Emotions like compassion, anger, and disgust can quickly label a situation as acceptable or unacceptable, pushing you toward helping, protesting, or withdrawing. Reasoning often arrives afterward to justify, refine, or question the choice. This is why people can argue logically yet still disagree sharply. They may share facts but carry different emotional alarms and priorities. Moral emotions also help groups coordinate. A shared sense of outrage can unite strangers. A shared sense of tenderness can inspire generosity. The fascinating part is that emotions can make morality feel obvious, which can be both helpful and risky. Helpful because it motivates protection of others. Risky because quick moral feelings can be hijacked by misinformation or prejudice. The skill is learning to listen to the emotion as a signal of values. Then invite reasoning to check the map. Love can feel calming because attachment signals safety. Love is not only excitement and romance. At its deepest level, it can feel like the nervous system finally unclenching. When someone is reliably there for you, your brain begins to treat their presence as a cue that danger is lower. Breathing slows, muscles release, even silence feels easier. This is attachment, the bond that turns another person into a source of regulation. It is why a partner's steady hand can settle you, why a parent's presence can calm a child, and why even thinking of a trusted person can soften fear. The fascinating part is that this calm is built over time through consistency, not through grand gestures. The body learns safety from repeated proof. Love can also be calming because it makes the future feel less uncertain. If you believe you will not face hardship alone, your mind does not need to stay on constant alert. Healthy love becomes a refuge not by removing life's storms, but by changing how alone you feel inside them. Every emotion is information, but not every emotion is a verdict. Feelings arrive with urgency as if they are always telling the whole truth. Anger insists someone is wrong. Anxiety insists something bad is coming. Shame insists you should disappear. But an emotion is a message, not a court ruling. It carries data about needs, boundaries, memories, and predictions. And it deserves attention. Yet, it can also be distorted by fatigue, old wounds, hunger, or misread cues. The powerful shift is learning to treat emotions like instruments on a dashboard. A warning light matters, but it does not tell you exactly what the problem is without investigation. When you pause, you can ask what the emotion is protecting, what it is trying to prevent, and what it might be assuming. That pause creates freedom. You can respect the signal without surrendering your choices. This is where emotional maturity lives. Not in suppressing feelings, but in interpreting them wisely. Emotions can guide you toward what matters, while you remain the one who decides what to do next. As we come to the end of our gentle journey through emotions, you may notice something quietly shifting inside you. We wandered through the way feelings rise before words, how the body remembers, predicts, protects, and connects. We explored how emotion colors perception, binds people together, and sometimes pulls them apart, not as flaws, but as ancient signals shaped by care, survival, and meaning. Emotions revealed themselves not as noise to escape, but as messengers moving through breath, memory, posture, and imagination. Some arrived as sparks, others as slow tides. Some softened us, others warned us. And beneath them all was a steady truth. Your inner world is alive, responsive, and deeply human. Nothing you feel is random. Each feeling has been shaped by experience, biology, and belonging, like footprints left by a long journey across time. Now there is nothing more you need to understand or hold on to. The thinking part of the day can begin to dim like lights lowering in a quiet room. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. If your breath feels busy, allow it to slow on its own without effort. Imagine your thoughts settling like leaves drifting onto still water, each one finding a place to rest. If you enjoyed this calm exploration, you might consider liking or subscribing or leaving a gentle comment below. It helps this little corner of the night reach others who may be searching for rest. And if you are still awake, another video is waiting on your screen, ready to guide you a little deeper. But if sleep is calling now, you do not need to resist it. Let the world soften. Let the quiet do its work. You have nothing to solve, nowhere to go. Sleep well and good night.